Welcome to Not Parenting. This is Carrie. Let's get untangling.
So Carrie, today we're going to be talking about the nervous system, and this really ties back into something you were talking about in episode 1, is this perspective shift of really starting to dial into this realization that we have these beings that until they're 25 years old, 21, 25, are growing in this massive amount of ways in their brains, in their bodies, in their emotions, and that when we're not careful, we might see some of the unsavory behavior that can develop out of that, or that can kind of emerge inside of that. We might start labeling some of that as poor behavior or bad behavior. And this is a great opportunity to talk about the nervous system, to explain, understand what is actually happening in us human beings when we start to go sideways. What's the pressure that's actually on our regulatory systems, our nervous systems all day long, and really giving us a little bit more of a wider lens of understanding why our people behave when we're loving how they're behaving and maybe when we're not loving how they're behaving. So let's start talking a little bit about how nervous systems and not parenting and understanding nervous systems and not parenting intersect.
Yeah, beautiful and beautifully said. So as I said in the last episode, you don't just have a baby, you have a big being. So there's an energy, a consciousness, an isness in there. But they arrive in this incredibly vulnerable and immature package. The physical body, we do not arrive fully cooked. And the reason for that is because we've learned how to stand upright, and the physical being, the human, the brain grows in the womb so big that we need to get out before the body and the nervous system are really done. And so we gestate externally for many years. I mean, we're here potentially 100 years. It takes almost a quarter of that for the whole system to get working, together. So when the little one arrives, they don't have the wiring in their brain to, speak a language. They don't have wiring in their brain to, move about. They don't have the wiring in their brain to manage the emotional experiences that they're having. So there's all this sensory information coming at them through their eyes, through their ears, taste, all of it, skin, all of it. And that information goes in, and the nervous system basically handles it. And that we're not perpetual motion machines. And especially when we're in that little body form, we are overwhelmed really easily. So we can get dysregulated. We can get thrown off balance very easily. So you've got this tiny little person. Let's think about, somebody going through toddlerhood. So here they are, they're, maybe 20 to 30 pounds in a little 2-foot body. And they're starting to explore in ways that are so enlivening. They're here. Everything's so new and exciting, and they're able to start moving around, and they're doing a little bit of art, and they're playing on the toys, and they're interacting with people. And all of that is so stimulating. And what happens inside of them is they basically fall off the cliff. Like they can't maintain enough emotional resourcing, enough juice, enough energy to allow for all that excitement and not for there to be fallout from that. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We all know what fallout looks like.
Right. We all know. So that's the meltdown. And old paradigm would call that misbehavior. Or if it didn't call it misbehavior, parents would often think, oh, I have to fix that. Or, my child's upset. It's my job to make them feel okay. And really, the new paradigm, what we now know from interpersonal neuroscience and attachment theory and all this beautiful research that's been done over the last 50, 70 years, is that they actually, when you're growing at any age, us too, and you get overdone and you take in too much and you get basically overstimulated and taxed, you start operating from a more primitive perspective. And that will look like crying and whining. And if you get so overdone, you might actually go into a panic, and that leaves you in a fight or flight state. And that's when a child is hitting or spitting or throwing or shutting down or running off, fight or flight. And so that's survival. That's them taking care of themselves. From the outside, it could look like unsavory or misbehavior. But within the understanding of how the nervous system works, you really start to understand that, oh my gosh, you're overdone on a level that I don't know if I could even understand. And you're running on fumes. And as a result, you're just spewing out whatever you can to, it is not a conscious, you're not operating from a thinking place. You're operating from a feeling or a reactive place. And in those moments, you don't need people telling you how to behave or even asking you, use your words, tell me how you're feeling, because you don't have access to that. You can't access that in your brain. What you're operating with is just a very vulnerable little creature, a little human who's so overdone, and they need an other nervous system to communicate, not verbally, but through the way you feel to them, that they're safe and that you are there to help them re-regulate. And that doesn't come from our words, that comes from our beingness. So, when I often say to people, if your little human is telling you funny stories and cooperating, they're operating from a more human place. They've got access to parts of themselves that are very high level, and they can do the things that you might need them to do. But as soon as their resources go low, they start falling off that human cliff, and they start operating more maybe like a mammal, or maybe just more of like a primitive version of themselves. And they're whiny and they're crispy and they're cranky and they don't want to answer your questions. An old paradigm would call that rude, or it would call, you would have you thinking, oh no, maybe this is going to be who they are, and they're just a very unkind human. But if we really look at it, it's more than likely they're just overdone, not just because of what's happening day to day, but because of how much development is going on. And so when you can step back and really recognize that they need an other who can calm them, who can help them know that they're out of sorts, but they're going to, they're going to be okay. And hey, you might need sleep, or you might need food, or you might need to just go outside for a little while and run around. That is helpful. And that not only re-regulates them in the moment, but it also models how to handle when big emotions come up, so that they start to wire in themselves how to do that. So in my field, people would often say, you're the external regulator for a while for these people. And they learn it, they get it after a while. But when big things happen and they get dysregulated to the point where they're melting down, whether they're a toddler in toddlerhood or teenhood or anything in between, it's so helpful to have another human who loves you and doesn't get triggered by that, or once in a while, at least, doesn't just take that personally and either want you to stop and shut it down, or gets upset with you, or wants you to be different than you are. Because think about it, as an adult, when you get overdone, parents are listening, you get overdone a lot. Imagine you just get so wiped out, and at the end of the day, you're not speaking as kindly to your partner as you would like, or you're not even able to articulate yourself because you just don't have enough juice in there for it. And maybe you are snippy, or maybe you say something a little bit more curt than you'd like to. You're not doing that because you want to act that way to this person you love. You're doing it because you do not have access to the part of you that can be more kind.
Yeah, what I love about turning our attention towards dysregulation versus calling something bad behavior is that, well, two things. It helps us to have some compassion, and maybe not only for our child, but for ourselves. I think it also helps us that anybody, any human being that is alive can point to a moment in their life, probably in the last couple of days, where they felt dysregulated. Maybe they didn't get enough sleep. Maybe they had a donut instead of, some Greek yogurt. Like we know that as grown-ups, that it doesn't take much. It's a crappy text that comes along. It's a bill we weren't expecting. It's a husband that's late again. It does not take much for us to get dysregulated. So look at these little people that while they're also dealing with just what's around them, their circumstances, the people that they're meeting all day long, but at the same time, their systems are taxed with this incredibly massive growth span that they're going through. And so not only are they quicker to dysregulate because they're just not as evolved as we are yet, but they also, their systems are taxed so much more than ours. But I love this idea of it. I feel like knowing this makes me so much more compassionate towards myself and towards my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the word. And really that it brings up empathy and even more expansive compassion. Like the idea, when I really stop and think about what it takes to be a human and to grow from babyhood into adulthood and then just to exist on this planet right now. I mean, it takes so much energy and we don't have unending energy. And so to be aware and hold that perspective and have that compassion, to me, that's just going to ripple out. And it doesn't mean no boundaries. That we're going to talk about that. Like this isn't permissive. This is really stepping back and recognizing that we are these physical creatures and what it requires for us to manage and handle what is coming at us, both internally and externally, is monumental. And we should be celebrating every day that we're here and that we make it because it's so big and it's so much. And the younger somebody is, the more porous they are to it all. They haven't built up filters like most of us have. So the world that we as adults perceive, because we've figured out how to, filter a lot out because there is so much, they don't have. So the thing that they might be melting down, oh, I want another cookie, has nothing to do with what's really going on. What's really going on is they were at school with 20 other kids and, their nervous system can't handle that much stimulation. So the minute they get in the car and you're ready to see them and have a nice conversation, they're puddling and kicking the seat and telling you how awful you are. That's not personal. They do not want the person who they are dependent upon for their food and their survival, basically, to be upset with them. They don't want to upset you. They can't operate differently in those moments. And to have compassion for that and to be more equipped, to have skills and tools, because trust me, this, we all know this, their bomb, their little nervous system dysregulation behavior, let's call it, the behavior that emerges from feeling dysregulated, the unsavory stuff, can hit those knots. It can yank at those places where either maybe you don't feel like you're enough or you're tired. So how dare you, ruin my, there's 1,000 places those knots get poked. And to be able to say, oh, right, I've got a kid who's been gone for 8 hours and they've been learning and they've been trying to be kind. And I get reports from school that everything's okay. When they get back with me, they're not going to be their most evolved self. And so I need to be aware of that. And there might be some things you need to do to prepare yourself for that. I'm going to tell a quick little story. I hope it translates. But in our home, we've got a smoke detector that's right outside the bathroom door. And so for the first year of living in this house, I would take a hot shower, and I love hot showers, and I would walk out and I would leave the door open, and inevitably the smoke alarm would go off and I would react and have my big freak out. And then I'd run in and do the thing. And then I realized don't leave the door open. It's me. I'm the one, I'm the one that gets to decide, like, take action so that doesn't happen, because it's going to happen if I do it that way. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think it's worth sharing too, that example that you gave of picking your kids up from school and having them melt down was my life. And it was actually a time where you and I got on a call together and I said, oh my God, this just is the worst. I haven't seen them all day, or I haven't seen them for 4 hours. They were in preschool at the time. And now I'm picking them up and I'm looking forward to seeing them. And they just, like you said, they were just sort of melting down in the car. And so yes, leading with compassion, and you helped me understand their nervous systems. But what it did was it produced new behavior. I started arriving at school with a snack. I would go and steady myself for a few minutes in car line, rather than hopping off a call right before they got put in the car. I would do some deep breathing. I would listen to some classical music. So it wasn't just that I became more compassionate. I became so much more resourceful. Like it was like tactical.
You had to prepare, right? Totally. How do I need to prepare for the thing that will happen if I don't, whether I prepare for it or not, right? Yeah. Like you could wish that they didn't get in the car that way, but when you understand how overdone they really are, and that behavior is the byproduct of that, and they won't get resourced until they've gone home and had a little space and had a snack and all the things. So how kind for them, but also how, smart for you to change the dance steps, to do it differently, to be thoughtful of like, all right, what do I need to do so that I'm there and I'm present for whatever unfolds, because me just reacting to their reaction is never going to be a good, like that creates knots.
Well, and what's hilarious is just because they've got bigger bodies, and my little babies are in bigger bodies now, doesn't mean that they don't get dysregulated anymore. In fact, just funny enough, they said to me a couple of weeks ago, after we had some dysregulated moments on the way home in the car, again, maybe you should start bringing us a snack, they said. And I thought, you know what, that's a really good idea. So just because their bodies get bigger doesn't mean the dysregulation goes away. And it just looks different.
It sounds different. Yeah. And it could potentially hit different knots. You could have no problem with toddlerhood, but you get to teenhood and all of a sudden there's something in you that you didn't even know was there because you put it away 20, 30, 40 years ago. And all of a sudden you're getting zinged and you're thinking, oh, they need to change. And I need to discipline that, or we need to have a big talk about it. But really the work, yes, there might be some conversations to be had, but another piece of that puzzle is to look at your own system and like really recognize like, whoa, didn't know that was in there. That really got me. Okay. I'm going to work on that so that when I approach them, I'm not bringing that with me. I'm not, here's my knot. Why did you poke at it? I'm saying, wow, I have a knot. I untangled it, or at least I looked at it. And this relationship is separate from that reaction that I'm having.
I love that. Well, and I think that resourcing ourselves and really figuring out ways of getting ourselves just so much steadier so that we can be more rooted with whatever they've got going on is something that we're going to be going in really deeply in the coming episodes. Anything else you want to share before we close it out for today?
No, I think it's, the main points are there's a lot going on both in them and in you. Mm-hmm. So have a lot of compassion and, tune in, because getting, really having a sense of why resourcing, and not even just resourcing, but self-awareness, why that becomes maybe your main tool in this way of operating, of not parenting, is worth practicing, cultivating, developing.
I love that. Well, that's exactly where we're going next. So stay tuned for the next episode. Great to be with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Not Parenting. For any resources or offerings we spoke about in the episode, remember you can head to carrieconti.com, or you can click on the links in the episode show notes. Thanks for being here.